Marco Rubio did an interview on Fox Business Network with Neil Cavuto, and he was asked if he supports permanent U.S. occupation of the Middle East. Here's his answer.
If you ever became president, if you ever had the interest, Senator, would you advocate a permanent U.S. troop presence in the region? Permanent.
Absolutely. Let me give you two examples of why. Number one, the al-Qaeda mission, the mission to target bin Laden would have been impossible without a U.S. troop mission in Afghanistan. Second, you've seen what's happened in Iraq, and people think that having troops on the ground would have prevented ISIL's advances. To some extent that's true, but there's another aspect to it. When the U.S. pulled out of Iraq, it allowed Maliki, then the prime minister, to go whole hog on his persecution of Sunnis, which then created fertile ground for the sort of insurgency we now see. So you have Sunnis in Sunni areas of Iraq that don't necessarily sympathize with ISIL's ideology, but they hate the Shia government so much that they were willing to welcome ISIL fighters as liberators at the time. Now I think they're starting to bristle under some of the more radical Sharia law that they're imposing. But at the time, ISIL took advantage not just of the weakness of the Iraqi army, but the lack of support that Baghdad had in many of the Sunni areas. So again, if the U.S. had a presence, we would have had more leverage over how Maliki conducted his affairs. You would have had a more stable region, but also a place where you can conduct operations against other threats in the region. So I'm not saying 100,000 troops, but certainly some level that allows us to project power quickly and confront challenges and threats.
When asked the question, should we have a permanent occupation of the Middle East? His answer was, quote, absolutely. Absolutely. I can't believe I'm going to say this, but credit to Neil Cavuto there, because he bothered to ask a question that if I was interviewing Marco Rubio, I honestly wouldn't have even thought to ask him that question, because I would have assumed immediately that, no, there's no way he's going to say yes to that. It's almost like I would be trying to get him with a gotcha question, but he would just flick it aside by saying, no, of course not a permanent occupation. But he said yes! He said yes to a permanent occupation. Okay, do you have any idea how massively unpopular that is and how undemocratic that is and how you're basically admitting at that point, like, yes, we would like to be like an imperialistic colonial power that just goes around the world and does whatever the fuck we want whenever we want. I mean, and his reasons are even worse. He's like, absolutely. And what does he say? Because we killed bin Laden. Right, we killed bin Laden. Wouldn't that be more of a reason to not be involved in the Middle East anymore? Because that was our stated goal originally when we went in there we need to get people back for 9/11 and decimate Al-Qaeda. Mission accomplished. Done. Hello. The leader's gone. That group is in disarray. Now another group took its place. But if your goal was we need to get revenge for 9/11 and get the people who did it, fucking done. You're making our case for us, but you're using it as evidence for your case. That doesn't make any fucking sense. And furthermore, how did we get bin Laden? Special forces. So how exactly would that point lead you to the conclusion that we should keep a giant base in Iraq or Syria or elsewhere in the Middle East, where, of course, we're opening ourselves up to be bigger targets and we're breeding more Muslim hatred against us? That doesn't make that point. Again, it makes the opposite point. If anything, it shows us that if/when we have a problem in the region and we need to get involved, you send SEAL Team 6 and then you bring them back home. You send the experts in to do the thing that they do and then you come home. You don't permanently set up shop like we're the East India Company. What a joke. This guy, Marco Rubio, is such an empty suit, it's ridiculous. He's George W. Bush Part 2, except slightly more articulate. Okay, and look, I know this isn't the strongest evidence for this case, but it's certainly one piece of evidence for this case. He's such a robot, and he's so fake in everything he does. Notice when he talks, it's always the same cadence, and he usually does the classic politician fucking hand motion. And also, look, the water drinking incident. Come on, we can't put that aside, man. We can't put that aside. Because it's not like, if I had to take a sip of water in the middle of one of my rants, what would I do? I would fucking take a sip of water and continue talking to you and act normal because I'm a human and humans drink water. But what did he do? He couldn't break from his politician. I'm a politician. I'm going to have the right posture and speak the right way mindset. So what did he do? He had to fucking look at the camera in an awkward way, grab the water in his head the entire time. He's thinking, I hope they don't see this. I hope they don't see this. I hope they don't see this. Fucking super like scared about it and everything. It's like, dude, either hold off a little longer, right? And drink at the end, or own it. Own it. Excuse me. I was parched. Anyway, where was I? But he can't do it. He can't do it because he's an empty suit. There's nothing in there. There's no policy. There's no intelligence in his head. And his other reason for why we should be in the Middle East permanently, because of the Sunni-Shiite conflict. How does that lead to the conclusion that we should be over there permanently? If anything, it's the opposite conclusion, because what you're saying is this is a centuries-old fight, and it's going to continue because they have a deep religious difference between the two. They're going to struggle for power and authority, and why would you want to put us in the middle of a gigantic civil war that we have absolutely nothing to do with? We make ourselves bigger targets when we get involved in a situation like that, and we unite them against us. Again, it doesn't make any sense. Look, if anything, his points lead to the conclusion that we should stay out, maybe every once in a while use special forces, okay, and break up Iraq so that we can separate the Sunnis and the Shiites and the Kurds, and they can each have their own territory, and that would lead to much more peace, instead of vying for control of this one arbitrary state that isn't really a state, and there's always going to be warring going on if that state continues to exist between the Sunnis and the Shiites. So Marco Rubio, no clue what the fuck he's talking about, and advocating a position that I don't even know if some neoconservatives would agree with that. That might even be more right-wing than Dick Cheney and Bill Kristol.